Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to do a TBR update video. So as some of you know, one of my reading goals this year was to decrease my TBR and buy less books. It's a very classic goal, I think, on BookTube, especially a few years into BookTube. I think many of us come to this conclusion that we want to change up the way we add books to our collection, and I think it goes hand in hand with ending up buying more books when you are on BookTube for several reasons, one of them being just the exposure of all of these new books that you might not have come across otherwise if you weren't watching or doing BookTube. So that was one of my goals for 2021, and I did a video I think at the end of last year called The State of My TBR, where I talked a little bit about how many books I have unread on my shelves, some of my plans, and a overview of the TBR in its entirety. So today I just wanted to sit down and chat a little bit about the year's progress and how the goal has been going, what my numbers are at the moment, and some of the general changes I've seen throughout the year in terms of this goal. My reasons for wanting to decrease the number of books I have unread on my shelves were several, one of them being space, of course, and the buying less books is connected to money, saving money to buy other things as well. But a major reason I wanted to focus on this year was that I wanted my shelves to be better reflective of who I am as a reader. I wanted more of my collection to be books I had read and enjoyed, therefore kept after having read them. I wanted to have a sense of being able to choose books to reread as freely as choosing a book that I hadn't read before. I wanted to have a different balance between the read and unread on my shelves, as a full personal library. And so the focus I had was never to have a zero TBR, which works for some people. It doesn't work for me. It isn't something that I'm aiming at in the first place. It was more that I wanted, first of all, to make sure that the books I actually do own always reflects my interests. So I don't want to have books on my shelves that I'm no longer interested in reading. I always want to make sure that I check to see that the books I have on my shelves are still relevant to me as a reader in any given situation I find myself in no matter how my reading tastes change. I want to make sure that the books I do actually own are still of some interest to me. It doesn't mean that I'm planning on reading them in the next few weeks, but just to feel that all of the books that I have are potential reading I could be doing tomorrow, or it could be in a year, but just still having that interest in reading it. And so I started the year off with 451 unread books, and at this point in time I have 386 unread books. So that is 65 books down from the beginning of the year until this point in time, which there's still a few days left of 2021, but that is the general gist. I also counted the division between fiction and non-fiction just for my own sake. I was curious about how many of my TBR books were either one of those categories, and as it turns out, it is a fairly even balance now, which is good. So I have 47% non-fiction and 53% fiction. For several reasons, this division has been evening out, which I think is a good thing. It gives me the options I need for either one of those things. I did a bit of a general counting of my numbers, and I have bought around 70 books this year and read from my own shelves 50 books, and so you can already tell that a big number is missing, is somewhere else, and that is the Unhauled books. I don't usually talk about Unhauls or DNFs, which is also included in that last number, because I don't find it very interesting personally for me. When I decide not to read a book, I just get rid of it. I put it in a pile of books to donate, and then I don't think about it anymore because it's not part of my reading life anymore, so I don't really make a point of cataloging that anymore. I tried to keep track of the number of Unhauled I did earlier in the year, but then I lost track of those. Because like I mentioned earlier in this video, I always want to make sure that the books I have in my collection are still books I'm interested in reading. And so I do regular culls of my shelves. So with the Unhauled books, I have made a few discoveries about my reading tastes, and there are certain things that are more sort of general changes, I would say. So when it comes to the fiction, I have Unhauled quite a few books that are general fiction or even literary fiction that are originally written in English, because a lot of the fiction I read are in translation, global literature, some of it is in Swedish, and that is how I want it as well. For example, books on literary prizes, long lists and short lists for English literature, they just don't really do much for me, and I don't necessarily feel like I need to own them. They are so easily accessible through my library that I don't need to have them in my collection. When it comes to the nonfiction, I've realized that I don't really like broad scope histories. I prefer them to be more specific or to be very narrative driven, and so I've definitely made some calls with that type of criteria as well. So that is just two examples of the type of books that I've unhauled. But like I said, the number of books I've bought is around 70, and the number of books from my own shelves that I've read is 50. So the remaining number that has to happen in order for my decreasing of 65 books to be accurate is 90 books. So 90 books that I unhauled, and that also includes books that I have DNF'd and then unhauled. And that's obviously quite a big number, and a big reason for that is because I've been buying a lot of secondhand books, often on a whim, in the past. And they have just been recycled, as I said, through my calls. So that is the numbers as far as the overall overview goes. And the unhauling has been lessening in the last few weeks and months. Most of it has happened in the first half of the year. Naturally, as I have fewer books on my shelves, they are more sort of concentrated to the books that I'm actually really interested in. To have a sort of contrast, to something to compare with these numbers. I also looked at what my numbers were for 2020, which was the year that I attempted to do the TBR decrease for the first time, and that wasn't successful at all. Last year I bought 108 books, which obviously this year I have bought less. Almost 40 books fewer, almost 40 books less than last year, which is for me a major development and something I'm very happy about. And I've also read more of the books that I have on my shelves this year in comparison to last year. I read 30 books on my TBR. So I feel like with both the decreasing of my TBR and the buy less books, I have been very successful. And as I said, I'm very happy about the movement, even though a big portion of the decreasing has come from unhauling, not my reading. I still feel very happy about it because the unhauling has been important for me in sort of going hand in hand with how my tastes have changed and me coming to terms with that and seeing what kind of books I actually want to read, want to own, and to learn from what I see in the patterns of the books that I'm interested in. One of the things that has been a sign that I'm going in the right direction is I was looking at the number of books I've bought this year that I've also read this year, which is 17 books, which Out of 70, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's still more than last year. So last year, as I said, I bought 108 books and I read 10 of them in that year. Obviously not a lot, for that is less than 10%. And I feel like just from the sake of buying more books that I read in a close proximity, that is a sign for me that my buying is more reflective of my current interests. It's more on the nose. It's my buying is more, I would say, more realistic. Just being more mindful with how I buy books, I feel like has made me also read more of the books that I do add to my shelves in a closer proximity, which is important to me. Because it means that I'm doing buying that makes sense in my reading life. It fulfills the reason, the purpose it has in the first place. That I buy things that I need right now, rather than to have a collection of books that are just stagnant, which is exactly what I'm trying to avoid. So, like I said, I feel like I've learned a lot with just looking at my patterns and behavior when it comes to my bookshelves and my curation and what I add and what I take away, and how that is reflective of me as a reader and how I've changed as a reader as well. And a lot of the change in terms of my taste have definitely come with projects like Invisible Cities, which changes a lot of my priorities. So I think that was all of the numbers and general things I wanted to say about the state of my TBR at the end of 2021. I am not planning on making a decreased TBR / buy less books as a reading goal next year. I have other things that I want to prioritize. I feel like a lot of the things I've learned I will still be working on, and I don't need to have this as a main priority next year. Although I think some of my reading goals is kind of connected to this goal in certain ways. I'll talk more about that in my reading goals video. But lastly, I just wanted to show you the books I have read from my TBR this month, and also briefly talk my way through my last book haul of the year. So the 3 books I have read from my TBR in December is Truffle Hound, On the Trail of the World's Most Seductive Scent, with Dreamers, Schemers, and Some Extraordinary Dogs by Rowan Jacobson. This was a fantastic book. It was one of the books that I've bought in the last few months as well, so it is part of my book haul, and I bought it in November, and I started reading it immediately as it arrived in the mail, and it was a blast. I will talk more about this in my favorite books video shortly. Next I have Real Estate by Deborah Levy. I finished this one in the aftermath of Christmas Eve. This is the 3rd and final part in her living autobiography trilogy, and I'm so glad I got to this one before the end of the year. I have now read all of the trilogy this entire year. I've now read all of the trilogy in this year, which I'm really happy about, and this was another great book. Definitely kind of a comfort book for me. This entire trilogy actually is kind of comfort reading for me, so it was very appropriate for the Christmas, the most sort of stressful days and hours around Christmas Eve. Yeah, there's that one. And then I also just finished Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, and this was translated by Megan McDowell, I would guess. Yes. This was translated by Megan McDowell, and I finished this one on Boxing Day, which is my birthday. This is a collection of short stories, and they are so weird. There's a lot of content warnings and trigger warnings to go along with this book. Some of them made me incredibly uncomfortable, but I still find her fascinating as a writer. They are, most of them, what I would classify as horror, and more horror than Things We Lost in the Fire. Things We Lost in the Fire is very violent, but is more realistic horror, whereas this one is more centered around fears and taboo and the unconventional. It's a very interesting collection, definitely. So there's that. And then let's move on to the book haul section. I'm gonna start with the ones that hasn't arrived yet. We have Song of Lovino and Song of Ocol, and this was written by Okot Bitek. This is written by a Ugandan author, and I got this one to read for Invisible Cities in February. I also mentioned it in the February announcement and TBR. I will link that in the description below. The other one I have is the book I've bought for Algeria that we have in January for Invisible Cities. This is Chroniques Selected Columns 2010 to 2016 by Kamel, Daoud, and this is a collection of essays and articles by this author on Algerian politics and culture and various things, which I thought sounded really interesting. I was particularly interested in non-fiction, and so this one was one of the ones that stood out to me. I have recently bought Whose Body by Dorothy L. Sayers, which I'll probably be starting in the next few days because it has arrived in my post office. I just need to pick it up. And this one I bought because of Sarah from Hardcover Hearts. She has been talking about her love of Dorothy Sayers, and I really love Golden Age crime, like Agatha Christie, but for some reason I haven't gotten to Dorothy Sayers, and Whose Body is the first book in one of her most popular detective series. So this one I thought sounded like a perfect book to read in the Christmas holidays, so hopefully I will be starting that one very soon. And then I have a few books that I have ordered for January in Japan, which is a read-along happening on Instagram that is hosted by EndNotes. I will link her Instagram below. I love Japanese literature so much, and I have for many years, and this just gives me the perfect excuse to prioritize it. The ones I've bought because of this, I've just been using this honestly as an excuse, and I wanted to buy a few books as a birthday gift to myself. So so the books that I've ordered for Japanese lit is In Praise of Shadows by Junichiro Tanizaki, which is a essay about sort of space and shadows and art and culture, and space in the term of both physical space and sort of metaphysical space, I think. Junichiro Tanizaki is one of those authors that I've been meaning to get to for a long time because he is a classic Japanese novelist and an author, but I haven't read anything of him yet. NP by Banana Yoshimoto is gonna be my third Yoshimoto book that I'm going to be reading. I have read Goodbye Tsugimi and Kitchen by her in the past. Kitchen I really enjoyed. Goodbye Tsugimi I didn't like that much, but NP I'm really interested in. It sounds kind of meta, and I think it's about a book or a script that people are trying to translate, and something happens when they're trying to translate the script. It just sounds very strange, but definitely like something I could enjoy. The next one is Toddler Hunting and Other Stories by Taeko Kono, I think. And this one is a short story collection, and they are described as sort of unsettling, slightly sinister, which is definitely my kind of short stories, and the description of some of the short stories really appealed to me, so I thought that would be perfect. The Easy Life in Kamisari by Shion Miura is again gonna be my second book by Shion Miura. I read The Great Passage in January this year, so I'm really looking forward to reading another of her books. I really enjoyed her writing style, and this has also been translated by Juliet Winters Carpenter, who is currently my favorite translator. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. I don't really know what this one is about, other than I think it's set in a mountain location, but I'm interested because of the author and the translator. Blue Bamboo by Osamu Dazai is another author I've read before. I've read Schoolgirl, The Setting Sun, and No Longer Human, and I thought it was time to finally get to this one. This is again a short story collection, and I think it's the short stories are supposed to be sort of from the midpoint of his career of writing. So I'm really curious to see what this one is like. And the last one is going to be a new author for me. That is The Silent Cry by Kensaburo Oe. And this one is a crime type novel where I think the main mystery is something to do with brothers, and siblings in books is always something I'm curious about, but in particular I was really curious about trying Kensaburo Oe out. So those are the Japanese books. The last 4 books I have to show you for my book haul. I have physical copies of, they have already arrived. So we have I the Supreme by Augusto Roa Bastos, and this was translated by Helen Lane. This is a book I got for Paraguay for Invisible Cities in November, which I obviously have not read yet. It is about a dictator and something to do with language, I remember, which is one of the reasons I was interested in it. It says, I the Supreme is a darkly comic, deeply moving meditation on power and its abuse, and on the role of language in making and unmaking whole worlds, which definitely sounds like my kind of thing. So because I didn't get to this in November, I will definitely try to get to it in 2022. The next one is because of Roxy from Chaotic Bibliophile. This is a natural history of the piano, the instrument, the music, the musician from Mozart to modern jazz and everything in between by Stuart Isakov. I put this on my TBR several years ago, but then I think it was this year that she read it and really enjoyed it, and that stamp of approval was all I needed to have a reason to buy this one. So it's all about the piano. I love reading about the piano for some reason. Reading about classic instruments is something I have really enjoyed. I've talked more about my music nonfiction interest. I will link that video in the description below. Another book I bought because of Roxy is Pnin by Vladimir Nabokov. This is her December pick for her long overdue book club, I think it is called. This was, as I said, the December pick. I haven't read it yet. We'll see if I get to it before the end of the month, but I've been meaning to read more Vladimir Nabokov for a long time, so I decided to pick this one up. And lastly, we have a book I stumbled upon in my local thrift store, and this is Mountains of the Mind, A History of Fascination by Robert Macfarlane. I needed to have this, obviously, because it's all about mountains and nature writing, and Robert Macfarlane is a classic writer in this genre. So those are all of the books that I have recently added to my shelves, and my general state of my TBR after this year's progress with buying less books and decreasing my TBR. I would love to know if you have had a similar goal this year, how that has gone, if you have had any other reading goals and how those have been going over the year, if you are planning to make a decreased TBR kind of project next year. Any thoughts can go in the comments below. Let's have a chat. I hope your holiday has been really fantastic so far. I hope you're doing well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.